Hello, welcome back for our fifth and final panel on housing. The UK government will ask Homes England to play a wider role in supporting local government to drive their ambitions for new affordable housing and regeneration in their areas. Homes England will use its Homes England will use its resources, expertise, experience, and buying power in dealing with developers to enable local leaders to leverage available in a particular place. Poor housing quality, overcrowding, and a reliance on temporary accommodation for vulnerable families contributes to unnecessary poor health and quality of life for many. The aim is for action on two fronts. First, to build more housing in England, including more genuinely affordable social housing. Second, to launch a new drive on housing quality to make sure homes are fit for the 21st century. By 2030, renters will have a secure path to ownership, with the number of first-time buyers increasing in all areas. And the government's ambition is for the number of decent rented homes to have fallen by 50%, with the biggest improvements in the lowest performing areas. Well, to help us navigate this topic, our panelist, John Walton, Regional Director of Rent Plus, which provides affordable rents to buy with institutional investment. Tom Renhard, Cabinet Member for Housing Delivery and Home, Bristol City Council. Tom was first elected in 2021 and is currently the Cabinet Member for Home and Housing Delivery. He's a passionate mental health campaigner fighting to protect mental health services and calling for more funding so people can access the support that they need. Barrington Billings, Chairman of Manningham Housing Association. Barrington began his senior housing career in 1990 as an Executive Director at Hallmark Community Housing. Since then, he's held senior executive level posts at a number of housing associations such as Prime Focus Group and Places for People Group, and worked for the housing regulator as a senior stock transfer advisor. And Alison Heald, Partnership Director at Trafford Housing Trust. Alison joined THT in 2005, staying with the company. When L&Q Group, the National Housing Association, acquired THT in 2019, as part of the acquisition deal, THT continues to have its own executive management. Alison is an experienced senior housing professional specializing in external policy development and legislation, and is skilled in stakeholder management, negotiation, change management, and budgeting. A very good afternoon to all of you. It's great to have you with us. As ever, if you'd like to put some questions to our panelists, do just use the Q&A tool to take part in our discussions. So, Alison, let's start with you. I want to ask you how you think that the current economic turmoil is going to affect the pace of levelling up when it comes to housing.
Thanks, Samantha. I suppose the first thing to say is there's been actually quite a lot of movement as of this afternoon. But I was at the Inside Housing Levelling Up and Regen conference in Birmingham last week. And one of the panels there, they were talking about the ABC of challenges levelling up that we as a sector and indeed a country have been tackling over the last few years. And it really resonated with me. So I just wanted to share that ABC. So the A started off with our austerity and how it's becoming increasingly difficult to ensure the most vulnerable in our society. Many of whom of our customers are seen, heard and helped. The B was for Brexit and the C was for COVID, and significantly for us in social housing, the disproportionate impact COVID had on a number of factors, including place, ethnicity, age, vocation and level of pay. Now, the conversation continued, and if that ABC, if that wasn't enough, the panel actually went all the way up to I in the alphabet in terms of the challenges that we're facing as a sector, and indeed the challenges that we're facing in terms of levelling up. So the D was for decent homes, including fire safety works and regeneration. And as a sector, we urgently need to invest in our current stock. There's been many years of underinvestment, in a large part due to rent cuts and freezes. But we cannot delay any longer. We cannot and will not slow down fire safety works. That's an absolute non-negotiable and a critical area of focus. But we also need to urgently look at the very fabric of our buildings and how this links into retrofitting and ensuring homes are fit for purpose now and in the future. As I'm sure many of you will have guessed, the E was for energy crisis. And that's not just from the perspective of our customers' own bills, but also service charges. And while this afternoon we heard about a revised offer of £3,000 cap for 12 months, the uncertainty of what communal energy looks like is really important to us and our customers, and the detail of that is still quite sketchy. So the F that the panel were discussing in this levelling up debate was around fiscal events. Again, very timely, given the autumn budget this afternoon. And while I personally am yet to see the pages of detail that sit behind that announcement, on the surface, there seems to be a number of positive elements, including double-digit increases in universal credit and state pension, and I think it was 9.73% increase in national living wage. And those things ultimately helping those most vulnerable in our society, many of whom are our customers. To move on to G and the government rent cap, again, quite timely today. For those that aren't aware, the agreed formula for housing associations for rent increases has been CPI plus 1% over the last few years. And while every housing association CEO I spoke to, we were never going to apply the 11 or 12% that we could have done. A government consultation on what that gap should be went on over the last couple of months, and looking at options of 3%, 5%, and 7%. The announcement this afternoon was actually a cap of 7%. And while it's welcome news in terms of our ability to invest in business plans, there's an unquestionable impact on our customers who are in employment and pay some or all of their own rent. And I think there'll be a lot of conversations over the coming months about how we can support those customers. So 2 more challenges. H, the housing crisis. We unquestionably have a national housing crisis. There's simply not enough properties available, as you were saying in the introduction. And that's before we even consider the need for affordable and social rent. And then finally, and this will come as no surprise, the I for inflation, and underpinning the whole list is the current levels of inflation fueling the cost of living crisis, which not only continues to increase prices across the board, but also put the lives of our most vulnerable in society. Interestingly, a group that now includes many of whom have never had to access support before at risk. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that housing, it has to be at the centre of levelling up agenda, and continue investment in times of austerity. I believe it has the ability to ensure housing markets continue to function and building that resilience for what hopefully will be an inevitable upturn. And positively, it's surrounded every day by people who are dedicated to making positive change and questioning the status quo and looking to find a way through that labyrinth of challenges that we have, but focusing on what's most important, which is our customers and communities, and levelling up those areas as best we can.
And Tom, what's your experience there in Bristol of housing and levelling up?
So it's a challenging picture for us at the moment. That said, we've just had our best year of housing delivery for over a decade, with 2,500 homes built in the 2021 to 22 year, second highest that's been done in the 15-year period that we were looking back. So we are getting more built. But of those, 474 that met the definition of affordable one way or the other, which again, highest level for 12 years, but it's not enough. It's not keeping pace. We've got over 19,000 households now on our social housing waiting list, over 1,200 households in temporary accommodation. So whilst we're starting to see an uptake and pace increasing, this is in the backdrop, obviously, of sky high inflation, increasing challenges around labour and materials in the construction sector, which have been hampered by Brexit as well as COVID and the war in Ukraine. So, whilst we'll be doing our best to keep the headwind, work against those headwinds and keep moving forward, it's not going to be easy. But that said, the other thing that we're really focused on is making sure that we're kicking off some areas of regeneration. And we've been really pleased that we've got an area called Temple Quarter and sort of St. Philip's Marsh, which will see over the next 30 years, over 10,000 homes built, 22,000 jobs created, 1.6 billion added to Bristol's economy. And we're really pleased that Homes England have invested 94.7 million as part of that to help us open up to Bristol Temple Meads train station. So we're really kind of motoring on and getting homes built, because homes, to talk about mental health, physical health, are one of the biggest determinants of what keeps people well. But what we've also got to make sure is when we're building homes, that we're building communities, that we are thinking about health infrastructure, that we're thinking about community amenity, that we're thinking about transport, height, density, addressing the climate and ecological emergency too. So it's very much a broader picture for us, of which homes is like a key tenet.
Okay, Barrington, to you, what do you make of the levelling up proposals? Will they make any difference to the communities that MHA serve?
From our perspective, I mean, we are a inner city housing organization in Bradford, and we house primarily people from BAME communities, mainly South Asian communities. And for us, the government needs to move on from talking about leveling up to actually delivering it. We've heard it for some time, and for the past 3 years, we've had lots of promises about Jam tomorrow in areas such as Bradford, which successive governments have failed to invest for many decades. So that Jam is yet to arrive, and people in deprived areas are suffering like never before. So MHA will always do our best, what we can only do with the little resources we have, what we can. And
what do you want to see from the government?
Well, we would like to see real commitment happening with our communities. So for us, leveling up is not just about the north-south divide. Fundamentally, it's about regional inequalities. Well, it focuses on regional inequality. For us, it's all inequalities. So it's around health, it's around education, it's around access to decent housing, it's around access to employment. Leveling up goes across all those divides, and you get them in the north, you get them in the south. Within certain communities, they haven't leveled up. Manningham Housing set up 30 years ago as a strategy to level up the BAME community in access to decent housing. Leveling up is not a new concept. It's just been rebadged. So for us, if we can start to address those type of inequalities within those communities, and we're happy to work with the government in delivering some of these things, but we're on the ground based in the community, and it's those real tangible differences that we can make locally, I think, will act. But we need those resources and not just the promises.
Yeah, I was born in Bradford, and my dad had a business there for many years. And I actually went back there a few months ago for the first time in years, and it was shocking how little it had changed. Actually, how little it had moved on. John, tell us more about what you're doing and helping people who rent to own their own properties, and whether that's a model that needs to be replicated more widely across the country.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Samantha. So I work for Rent Plus. We are a route for turning renters into homeowners, essentially. So the aspiration of, despite all of the difficult times that we're currently experiencing, there's lots of evidence to suggest that home ownership is still it's an aspirational form of home ownership that many people want to enjoy. And I think the biggest thing that we remove with our clients is to enable them a barrier-free entry into home ownership. So it's a very good way for tenants to come online with ourselves. They'll pay rent up to 80% of market. They're effectively give them chance to put down roots, send their kids to school, improve their credit rating if that's required, but most importantly, save for a deposit. And at the end of either 5, 10, 15 or 20 years, that family will be gifted a 10% deposit by Rent Plus to buy the said property that they've been renting for those amounts of years. And one of the things that we feel quite strongly about at Rent Plus, is a thing I share with lots of local authorities and RP partners, is we're not here to replace mainstream housing. We're here to add to the diversification debate on the delivery of a greater choice for people out there in the housing market. I'm a housing person. I've been in housing for over 25 years. I'm a great supporter of all the things that have been said on this call today. But I also think there's a large swathe of the population that, unfortunately, either they're trapped in private rented or they're living with mum and dad. They're excluded from mainstream social housing because they're working or whatever. And we give those families, those occupants, an opportunity to get on the housing ladder. So we welcome the chance to be part of this agenda. We work with local authorities that are often struggling to attract people into their areas for work. They can't afford to move there. And also, importantly, for RP partners, I think RPs now, even with the new, they're under real challenge in terms of capacity to do the things they want to do day in, day out for their tenants and their residents. And we can work with RPs to help that. We're institutionally funded, so we're not reliant upon grant funding from the government, and we can utilise that fund in order to help RPs grow and manage our units for us effectively, which is what we're currently working with partners right across the UK to do today. So we feel that we have a contribution to make, and we'd welcome the opportunity for greater collaboration across the sector.
Okay, and Alison, what role can housing associations play in the levelling up agenda, do you think?
I think if you I've worked in social housing for 18 years, so I'm obviously very passionate about it. And I think of a home as being the bedrock on which lives can be built, and the environment is just as important. And I think, as we've said on the call earlier, health, education, sense of place, reduction in crime, increasing levels of employment, the health and the well-being of our customers and communities, it's dependent on what we develop and how we focus on placemaking, social impact, and the long-term view of an area. As was said earlier, the regeneration, and to truly level up, we need to be working operationally and strategically in partnership. I thought what John was saying then was really, really interesting. So, we need to be talking to other housing associations, to voluntary groups, and we need to be talking to infrastructure around transport, education, health. We need to be data sharing, we need to be pooling resources, and we need to be providing those opportunities to build that resilience and level up our communities from that start place of having a safe home, and somewhere that people can aspire to live and want to live. And as I said earlier, personally, I believe that where possible, we should invest through difficult times and plan for an upturn. And for me, patient capital is key, and looking at the long-term view of an area. Now, real regeneration, it often doesn't financially stack up if you look at a phase-by-phase basis. But if you consider that long-term vision, do it in partnership, the scale of the development, the time it takes to transform an area, to truly level up an area, we need to be committed for the long term. And that's what housing associations are. We don't build and go, we're there. We're place making and place keeping. And if you consider those really large scale regeneration works, you're looking at 10 to 15 years before you're making an impact. And for us as housing associations, that is the commitment that we make, and the commitment that we make to levelling up, and comes back to what Tom was saying about regeneration and large scale regeneration. You need to be in it for the long term, and I think that's the main role that housing associations play.
Okay, thank you. Tom, you've got some colleagues joining you in the background having a bit of cake. They should share it with you. Very rude.
They really should. A bit disappointed. Where's mine?
Share it around. Tom, I want to ask you about tenants, and you're a strong advocate of protecting tenants' rights. And we've had this awful case this week of the little boy. The coroner found that he died from mold at 2 years old. Do you think things like that will change things? Will give tenants more rights? Will protect people who live in substandard accommodation? Does it need to be something shocking like that to make a difference?
I mean, the first thing to say is my condolences, obviously, to the family around what's happened. It shouldn't take something like that to happen to get change to happen. But if nothing else, it must be a catalyst for us to see change across the social housing sector. We have got to make sure that we're getting on top of stock condition. Obviously, one of the challenges, of course, is how burdens are funded with what's coming forward with the social housing regulation bill, when, not saying that we were looking to raise rents in line with inflation at all, but if rents are going to be capped, what does that mean? And at the moment, you've got challenges around choices between investing in the quality of your stock and the maintenance of the stock, and in some cases what is very old stock. We have over 60 high rises in Bristol, and I think it's been in the news around the challenges we're having around fire safety as well, and so you've got all those that are constant juggling act. But what it shouldn't have happened in that case is it shouldn't have taken repeated complaints being ignored, and what happened should just never have happened. And it's something that I think we all need to make sure we take stock, and we're thinking about how we're going to be more proactive in the management of our housing stock, whether we're a local authority or whether we're a housing association, but make sure we're really clear about the challenges that are associated with that as well. And it's not just about funding either, it's also about the market, the availability of work. We have real challenges recruiting surveyors, for example, within Bristol, and so if we can't get surveyors in to help with the work that we need to do to get the work in place to review our stock and then get the works commissioned, procured, contracted out, assuming we're able to contract in one go as well. It's all a very challenging picture. It's not an excuse at all for what we need to do, but we do have to be aware that these are all the challenges. And so what we do need is national government to really be thinking about what the workforce plans are, where we're seeing shortages across a range of sectors.
Right. And John, we're in a situation where a lot of tenants pay more in rent than they would do in a mortgage, which means that they then can't afford a deposit. And obviously you're trying to help with a situation like that. But you know, rents are going up exponentially still at the moment, and it's only going to get worse with the, you know, rising inflation. What can be done to help to protect tenants? Is there anything?
Well, I mean, our product, you know, it's a nationwide product, but what I'd like to see, and I mentioned it earlier, is I'd like to see local authorities working with Rent Plus, working with RPs across and developers on working with that diversification debate. So enabling more people to have greater choice when it comes to their housing needs. I think you're right. I think that there is I mentioned it, there's a trend in terms of people feeling like they are trapped in private rented sector accommodation, where they have the means by which they probably could get, you know, pay a cheaper mortgage to meet their housing needs long term. And the reason they can't is because they're kind of priced out. They're trapped from entering into that market. We want to work with as many partners as possible because, as I said, we use institutional investment to help unlock that. So we have a 10% gifted deposit that effectively gets used at the point of transaction. So a couple, a family, whatever, that are currently private rented, they could take on one of our properties and they could rent that for up to 20 years. And that gives real stability to that family. It gives them a chance to put their kids through school, for someone on a career path to really exploit that career path, so that when they come round to buying the property in 10, 15, 20 years time, that 10% gifted deposit that's built into our models, it's guaranteed to stay there. That's a real carrot, really incentive to enable them to actually get onto the property ladder at that point. So, you know, my response to the sector is to work with organisations like Rent Plus to look at how we can maybe break down old, you know, status quo of what is affordable housing. I should add that we work with developers generally on Section 106 planning gain opportunities. So my team are regularly involved in working and talking with local authority colleagues about ensuring that our product, our rent to buy product, is built into the Section 106. That takes time, and often it takes some convincing to get that agreed. But it comes back to diversification. The more choice we can give people out there, in our opinion, the better the housing sector can respond to the problems that are currently in place.
Okay, thank you. And Barrington, what single issue do you think would have the biggest impact in delivering the principle of levelling up to the communities that MHA serve?
I think for us, you know, there are so many, but the fundamental one for us, because we're a housing organization, is to invest properly in social housing to ensure that Homes England is at the heart of levelling up and is flexible and responsive to communities who genuinely need levelling up. I mean, housing associations and communities we serve have been let down for many years by successive home secretaries and housing ministers. I mean, if you look at the number of housing ministers we've had over the years, they change them every 2 weeks. And so, you know, it's not about, you know, sprucing up some shop fronts and putting some hanging basket and smiling for the camera and then going away. These are genuine communities that want to see real investment into their communities. And Michael Gove, hopefully, a big beast in the government, he will hopefully drive this through. And he's battling hard, obviously, to get the resources to do it. And so this is a great opportunity to make a difference. People need a visible demonstration that those with the power make a difference to their lives, and that they're serious about doing so. And this means delivering tangible outcomes that they can actually see work. And if they can do that, then I think that will make a big difference to our community.
Okay, thank you. Alison, in your view, can a focus on levelling up certain geographical areas in the country have a negative impact elsewhere?
Thank you, Samantha. Something that Barrington said earlier resonates with me, and something that's really stayed with me on this question of geography and levelling up. It was a media campaign on the day that the white paper was launched, and it was front page across the north. It included Birmingham, Yorkshire, Merseyside, Teesside, and it was an image, for those of us that remember, of Michael Gove, and there was 8 babies that had been born on the same day. And the headline was "Don't Leave Us Behind." And what it was basically asking was if the levelling up white paper gave those babies born in the north the same life chances of a child born in Michael Gove's patch of Surrey. And I suppose from that headline, you can clearly see that division in the narrative. And cynically, one could argue that I suppose the creation of diversion is in part intentional, but there's so much more going on and so much more that needs to be at the forefront of discussions, rather than this blanket north-south divide that in a lot of circles is presented as absolute fact. And if we consider the list of the 25 most deprived local authorities, English indices of deprivation, 14 are in the north, 9 are in the northwest, but 2 of those areas are in the south, so namely Barking and Dagenham and Hackney. And if we consider the overall mapping, the north, indeed the northwest, it absolutely is in urgent need of funding and is absolutely in urgent need of levelling up. And that's true on many levels, but that should not and cannot fully distract from the needs of customers and communities in the south. And as Barrington was saying, across the country, the drivers, they're often varied, but they need to be properly understood. So while, for example, health and education outcomes are generally worse in the north, housing costs in London and the southeast are the main driver, or one of the main drivers, if not the main driver, for poverty. So there's unquestionably more that unites us than divides us, and we need to be thinking in nuanced terms across all areas of the UK for the short and longer term planning, and applying levelling up opportunities where they're most needed for the benefit of customers and communities, and trying to move ourselves away from this north-south divide, which has taken over a lot of the talk around levelling up.
Tom, one of the things that you're committed to is enabling local people to have a strong voice on issues that matter to them around housing. How do you do that? What advice would you give around that?
So for us, we've got a big focus at the moment on some of our areas of growth and regeneration, some of those focus points where we're looking to get more homes built, but also looking to create jobs as well, and just think about how we're reshaping existing use. White House Street is one such area, which is a really interesting area of regeneration for us. It's going to see about over a 15-year period, about 2,000 homes being built, but that area is it's a light industrial use at the moment. So we've had to really think about how that we're doing that and how we're thinking about existing groups in the area. We've got a city farm nearby, and so we've really worked with the local community to make sure they've had their voices heard, but also made sure we've not tried to rush it and do it tokenistically. We've got to bring communities with us, and sometimes that can be challenging with what we're trying to do, but where it's done well can lead to some really exciting outcomes. And now what we've got with the White House Street regeneration is communities really behind what we're doing, with a really positive view of what the plans are there, where you've got multiple landowners, including us as a council, but also a couple of housing developers. And so, doing a range of activity, and not just the old questionnaire as well. Make sure there's a range of activities and different methods for people to be able to access, to get involved, and involve community groups that are actually trusted in their communities too. As a council, we don't need to lead all the activity ourselves. We can bring others in to help engage people and come up with a master plan then that we're all really proud of.
Okay, thank you. Last point, just in the last minute, to John, because you operate across the country, I'm interested in the sort of regional differences you see in the housing offering across the country.
Yeah, we tend to find our product does work better in areas where there's already a good, strong supply of social housing. And that's mainly around the fact that the local authorities in those areas, they look to us to maybe help them with employment challenges I mentioned earlier, and aspiration. And I think I come back to Alison's point about the north-south divide point, well made, that there are pockets of deprivation all over the country. We're finding coastal areas, there's certain towns and cities in the southeast where struggling with housing and just generally investment. So it is a mixed bag, Samantha, but we tend to find that in lower value areas, actually the problem there is not one of opportunity. I think we get lots of opportunity in those areas, but it's one of making sure that we're acting as responsible as possible when it comes to aligning people up with home ownership products like our own, and making sure that we're not setting people up to fail. That's a big aspect of our role. And so that we work really hard with residents to ensure that's happening. In more affluent areas, where I'd argue our product is in, you know, even in greater demand, the challenge for Rent Plus and similar providers is breaking the status quo, is working with those local authorities to enable them to provide that diversification of offer, because it's quite easy to say, well, no, we're only going to house those in housing need. I think that's important, but there is a wide spectrum of housing need in most of those areas.